Today we're going to work on a Bedell, what is this? A Bedell BSMCE-18-G, signed by Tom Bedell. All right, this is it's my sister's guitar, and it's in pretty good shape. It's not in bad shape, it just needs some maintenance. There is a couple of issues with it. Mainly we have a problem with one of the tuners. The cog itself is not functioning. So as we turn our tuner, our gear is not functioning, while others do. I did already try and grease these, lube them with a special graphite lube. That is something I would recommend. You can see some remnants of it here. I'd recommend that prior to determining your tuner or tuners are faulty. I will say the tuners that came with this guitar, even though it's a pretty decent guitar, the tuners that came with it are not that great. They're semi-low quality. So I think what we're going to do is, instead of just replacing or trying to repair this one tuner, we're going to replace all of them. The rest of the guitar is in pretty good shape. There's some dings here and there, some scratches. Nothing major. We are going to clean it a bit. We're going to try and take out some of the scratches. The other issue with this guitar, the main issue, other than the tuner, is a cracked saddle or bridge. So we're going to go through this, and we'll not just replace the tuners, but we'll also take care of the fretboard. It is pretty worn down. There's some grooves in there. We'll fix that. We'll polish, crown the frets. We'll also make sure it's set up for good action and intonation. The tuner, I'd recommend getting new tuners. I can show you what I got for these. They're not the highest end, but they are good quality, and they're also locking tuners. One of the ways you can tell these are not great quality is they actually have a false nut here. Typically when you see a nut on the tuner, well, that means you can hold it and it actually affects tightening of the tuner peg itself. In this case, this nut is false. It's just literally sitting there as the top part of the tuner peg, and when we take these out, you'll see what I mean. Got these off of Amazon, did some research. They're not full name brand Waverly's or anything like that, but they are pretty good quality. They're also locking tuners, and I think they're going to fit well, and the same style for the headstock to match. So we're going to install these tuners, and I'll take you through that. So these are known as gold open back tuners. We have replaced them with open back tuners, as you can tell, the same type for the screws that will line up. Here we go. Now, I mentioned before that the locking nut on these, if we turn this around, what looks to be a locking nut is actually not. You would think that this being a nut, this would turn. This does not turn. So what we'll find is, if we install these new tuners, we're going to keep that. If we kept that nut in, it would be a mixture of the gold and that. So instead, we're going to use the pieces that came with these Geikers. These are G-U-Y-K-E-R locking tuners, and That is the part number. You can get them on Amazon. Like I said, it's a pretty good brand, has some good reviews, and from what I can tell, it looks pretty good quality, but that doesn't break the bank. I think they're around 40 bucks, 35, 40 bucks. We're just going to use some needle nose here. So when you pull them out, you'll get something like this. And what we'll do is we will mount these new pieces. These new pieces that come with this are slightly larger than the holes of this guitar. And so what we're going to do is not use the ones it came with. These will work just fine. It will not match the chrome to the gold, but in this case I think that's going to be fine. So if you do get these, be aware that those pieces will not fit unless you route out those holes to be slightly larger. That's up to you. This is not something that my sister will be all that concerned with. So the other thing I'm finding is the holes are not exactly lined up, right? So now it is covering the other hole that it mounts into, and it is very close, so we could probably get the screw down in there and take care of that. So let's try this. And I do recommend using the screws that this came with because they are longer than the ones that we took out. And that's necessary because these are flatter and these are raised a bit. The new ones are raised a bit, so this would be better to use. So let's just try and see how this works. Screwing in just fine. And here's the moment of truth. Can we get this to work without having to drill a hole? We can do that if we loosen this and sort of come in at an angle with this screw. Maybe, maybe not. Let's try doing that one first. Get it started. See if we can get this one going. Yeah, that worked. Okay. So it's a little bit at an angle, but I don't think that's going to matter. Yeah, there we go. And I want to make sure this is fairly lined up. Okay. I like to go back and forth with each screw, not tightening one down all the way first, especially since this screw is at an angle. And like I said, that hole worked just fine. So I think we're going to be okay. Yeah, don't want to over tighten. Yeah, we're good. It's very, very, very good. And that's the lockdown mechanism. Okay. Let's see how that looks. And we're turning just fine. Now the hole, yeah, we're good on the hole for the string hole. Yeah, looks like that's gonna work. So let's do the rest of them and we will then be able to move on to other parts, other repairs and maintenance. You'll notice that these are left and right, and I don't believe they're labeled left, right. Yeah, it looks like they're not labeled. But it's pretty obvious when you put it on one side or the other where it should go. Obviously this one is not correct because you're jumped down here. You want to always make sure your keys are at the top of the unit. And that's the way they go. Pretty easy to tell. Okay, and now let's mount the rest of them. When you finish these, you want to just kind of hold the peg and move up and down just to see if we have any movement with the screws and the placement. You're going to be fine on the pegs themselves, but you want to make sure that the tuner itself is not loose. So, but we don't want to over tighten. We just want to get it snug. There we go, snug enough. Not moving. See how that one's moving just a little. So we're gonna a little bit more. Okay, because again, you over tighten, you're gonna strip that. I think we're good. Let's double check all of them. Good. All right, let's see how that looks. I kind of like the gold mixed with chrome. All right, so that does it for the tuners. What you want to do is loosen these. These are locking mechanisms. And you want to double check that your tuners, yeah, see some of these feel pretty tight, but that's okay. They'll loosen over time. You definitely don't want them to be super loose, but that's a good thing. All right, so done with that. We will move on to probably repairing the bridge. And once we've done that, we can clean the fretboard, level, crown and polish the frets, and I think we'll be done. Zoom in with the other camera here. Looks like we've got a bit of a crack down in between as well, or down in the bottom, but I think that will come together when we glue this. So you can see as this comes in, it should be flush and take care of that. And then we'll have that clamped down and we should be good to go. So we'll give that a shot. All right, we're gonna use our Type Bond glue. Probably see that, original Type Bond. Little zoom control there, but we're gonna carefully work in the glue with a paintbrush, with a small brush, and we'll get it in between those cracks. And we also want to pay attention to the lift under the bridge itself. And so we want to make sure that is flush with the soundboard, just like the rest of the bridge is. And once we get that done, or I should say once we get that glued, we'll then be able to tighten it down and hold it with some clamping. We'll have to get a little bit creative there. I'm going to remove the mic wire here. We don't need that in the way. Alright, so I'm going to put some glue on this piece of paper and we'll just use that with the brush. We don't need much. So I'm going to go ahead and just get a little bit of glue in here. And what we'll do is we'll spread this open. We don't want to crack it more. But we're going to make sure we get down into that area with the brush. It's eating it up pretty well. We'll get over here on the corner. We'll get down here, as you saw with that other piece. I want to get underneath with that brush bristle. It really helps us push that glue under. You'll see that come out with squeeze out. You'll see how well we glued it if we get a fair amount of squeeze out. We definitely want to see that. You can even see the brush coming through right here. Good sign. Yeah, very good. Don't need a lot of glue, but we just also don't want to underdo it. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for the glue. And then what we're going to need to do is clamp this. We can see with this clamp we're getting squeeze out as we pull towards the guitar back to bring that piece of rosewood together, and then we'll come over here on the side and we'll clamp it with one more to push it down, and we should get a good fit, and then we'll let that dry. We'll wipe some of this squeeze out off. And then we will use another clamp like this one on this side. See a little bit of squeeze out down there in the groove, so let's get that out. So that was a bit of a bear. We do have a clamp situation going on now. I used a small block of wood to flatten that down and protect the rosewood, as well as create a flatness of pressure across the bridge. So that's pushing it down nicely, and then we're pulling it together and we can see the squeeze out happening. So that's what we want. I'll wipe that down. We'll let this dry. This is how we look on the other side. I went ahead through there and cleaned up any glue that was squeezed out from that area. We'll be able to clean it up when it's all dry too. Okay, the glue is dried, and we're seeing that we've got a really good connection here. All right, we can see that we have a bit of residue left from the glue, so we'll scrape that off, sand it down, and that'll look fine. And then we'll get started on the neck and cleaning that. So let's do the sanding here, or the scraping, with a little bit of a razor blade. All right, that's pretty smooth, and then we'll just sort of sand that out a bit. I'll probably use some steel wool to smooth that out. So let's get that. It's looking pretty good. Just use a bit of steel wool on here, right in this area. Get the tip of the steel wool and just lightly go across it. When we're done with this, we'll condition the wood and smooth it out. You won't even notice probably. Get down here in the corner, the edge I mean. Just lightly go across the whole part to blend it in. Alright, we'll call that good, and then we'll move over here to the fretboard. Alright, we're going to start on the fretboard. You can see the grooves in here. This is mostly dirt and grime and sweat that's in, so we're going to use the same technique with the razor to just scrape this off. We're not going to hurt the wood at all. We're not going to dig into the wood and you know, maybe take 100,000s off, but very little wood. And then we'll go across and condition the wood later. We're also going to crown and dress these frets and polish them because we do have some grooves in there. But let's start with scraping the dirt and grime off and hopefully get rid of these deep divots of hard playing over the years. So we'll start at the top and we'll just go like this, up and down from the frets over. Yeah, right there, that's safe. Go up against, start from one edge and go up against the fret, and then come back the other way. And let's get this grime out here. Very light. That feels pretty good. And we'll move on to this one. This one's pretty deep. Pretty thick, I mean. You can already see the difference, and you can definitely feel it when you run your finger across this. It feels like a railroad track. This is going to help. Smoother playing, smoother feel. Probably have to do this, I don't know, once a year, so it depends on how much you play. But that dirt and grime builds up over time and isn't great for the board. You want to condition this board on a regular basis, the fretboard. Keep that wood in good shape. And dirt and grime off of it. Okay, so that's looking good. And it gets even worse as we move through here. Look at all that. Not going to hurt the pearl inlays at all with this razor. Probably speed this up for you. Pretty boring. But the end result will be great. So look at the difference already. If you have a brush, it's good to use it. Get all that out so you can see if there's any grime left in between the frets and the board. This looks pretty good so far. And a lot of this will come out even more so when we smooth it with some sandpaper, as well as probably some steel wool. Yeah, this is good. See how nothing's really coming off now. So we're getting down to the wood in more of its original state. Really good. I think that's pretty good. So we can see that all of our grooves are, if you could feel this fretboard is very smooth now. So we've taken all the grime out, which causes the ridges between the strings. And then when we go to sand it a bit and then polish it and condition it, it'll look great, like brand new. And then we'll do the frets next. All right, we're going to level off these frets. What happens over time is some frets wear down more than others. One way to tell is when you set up a flat rocker to see. Usually you want to go with 3 frets. So right here we can see we got a slight difference. We're rocking with a gap at different areas of the frets. And as you go up the fretboard, you notice there are some higher spots than others. This one's good right here. So we're getting a lot more play on certain frets. And at some point these frets are going to need to be replaced, but for now we can just level them off and then crown them to round them. So what I'll be doing is using a wooden block with 600 grit, sandpaper taped to it, and we'll just go across the fretboard, not too hard here, but we'll just get these a bit more leveled, and then we'll crown them, and then we'll finish with polishing and so forth. So let's get started. You want to do long strokes. And this will get the high points down a little closer to be even with other frets. It's also going to help with the grooves that are worn into some of the frets. We had a higher spot right here. You can kind of feel it actually. Okay, that's probably good enough. And we'll recheck it just to see if any of that rocking improved. Yeah, that's a little better. Almost nothing here. A little bit there. Nothing here. Nothing there. Nothing flat. Good. A little bit there. A little bit down at the bottom. Right around here and right around here. So we'll do a little more passing in those areas. Here. All right. That should be good enough. Again, we really ultimately want to replace these frets, and I think it's probably going to need that pretty soon, maybe in a year or two, depends on how much it's played. But it's definitely going to be in a lot better shape now because, as you can see, I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, but when we look down at the frets, we're even no longer seeing the major grooves that were in some of these. A little bit of a groove on some, but I'm going to crown these next, and that'll make it a little more rounded at top and help out. So let's do that next. I'm going to use this crown file. It's a really good one. I paid a fair amount of money for this, so I got great reviews. And we've got different size fret files, so these are pretty thin. These are not jumbo frets, so we're going to go with probably the smallest right here. I'm going to go with the smallest or the thinnest filer. Let's try that. We'll come around on the other side and get the corners of these. Alright, so those frets are now pretty rough. They're definitely crowned. What we'll now do is we'll apply a few levels of grit to the frets to get them any coarseness off of them, as well as get them to a polished state. And we'll do that with a series of a few different grits of sandpaper. Alright, we're going to get started on polishing these frets, and I did tape up the neck and the area close to the body and top so we don't scratch it. I'm going to be using these StewMac sanding blocks or grits, so I'll start with 220, go to 400, and then 800, and I might then hit it with some sandpaper that's probably in the 1200 to 2000 range for tight polish. Then I'll finish it up with using just some regular scratch doctor. We'll probably polish it with a little grommet device after that. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and finish it with steel wool instead, real fine steel wool. That should be enough. We don't necessarily need to do the 1000 and above grit because this is going to cover that. These frets are in pretty good shape now that we've leveled them. So we're just really just taking out those fine scratches and polishing it. This will do the trick. And you'll start to see how this is becoming really smooth with no scratches that are going to be visible in it. We'll just dab a little bit on the frets. This is going to do a high polish for us. I'll start with a harder buffer, and we'll go to a softer one to end it with. We'll go ahead and wipe a lot of this away because now we're just going to do a final polish. And we'll use the softer polisher. All right, here we go. Alright, now we'll take off the tape and then we'll re-clean the fretboard and we'll be done with this part. Alright, next thing we're going to do is clean and condition the fretboard. We've already, earlier we did level these, we sanded them a bit, cleaned them up, got rid of the gunk, flattened them, and we should be good on that now. I'll just go down each fret and go in the corners to make sure there's no more of the polishing agent. Alright, we're just going to use some raw linseed oil to condition the fretboard now that it's been leveled and cleaned and smoothed out, and that will help condition the wood and keep it from drying, cracking, etc. We don't need much of this. And once we apply this, I do recommend to let it sit for about 5 minutes. Let the wood soak it up, come back if it needs more, and then just wipe it off. You don't need a ton of this stuff. It does its job. But we'll see after a couple minutes how it's... See, we can already see that some parts are soaking it up pretty quickly over here. Do a little more. That's a lot more. Yeesh. Oops. While we're doing this, we're going to go ahead and let this set. Like I said, since I poured a little more than I wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and use some of that on the bridge. You want to condition this as well. We pulled the pegs so we can get all of the wood. Let that settle. Good to condition this wood as well. It might have kept it from cracking in the first place. That does look like it has a gap, but trust me, when you run your finger over it, it doesn't. It just looks that way a bit. So we're good. Okay. Let that sit, come back and clean it up in a few minutes. Alright, well, the fretboard drank it up, and I think we're good. Most of it is still shiny, showing that we've got it well conditioned. And looking at a pretty good situation here. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just wipe it down and we'll begin to string this up. And I did notice that the saddle has a crack in it right there. You can see that right there. So instead of creating a new saddle, I'm going to repair that, and I'd like to use the same saddle. It is pretty loose in the joint, and that's not optimum, but that tells me that perhaps this is not the original saddle. I don't know why it would be so loose. It should fit in very snug. but we may try and snug that a little better so it's not so loose. I just don't want to go through creating a new saddle for it, because this one's in pretty good shape and it does appear to be bone, so I'd like to keep that. Just wipe this down. Much better than it was, for sure. All right. Back to the Bedell. It's been many weeks, several months actually, since I have worked on this guitar. I need to get this done. I'm going to bring it over back to my sister today. And really all we have left is the bridge. And if you can see, we've got a broken out piece, and I believe this is bone. So what I'm going to do is take a broken bridge I have made of bone. I'm going to sand some of that and mix it with crazy glue and hopefully fill this and shape it and be good as new. I also used a thin piece of walnut, similar to these pieces that I've shaved, and that has been fitted in there so that I can get this piece tight, because it was loose. And we don't want it loose, it'll lean forward, and that's not good for intonation and transfer of sound, etc. So let's get this done, and then we'll clean up, polish up this guitar, play it, and I think we're done. So we'll use a razor instead of the sandpaper. That sandpaper mixed some of the gray sand into it, so it made it all gray when I glued it. Let's try the razor. Really? Alright, I think that will work. May not show up on camera, but we've got a smooth top here where that string can take a groove. Alright. Now that does not move. Moves a little, but it's much tighter than it was, so we should be good there. Let's get this thing strung up. Well, I just discovered one other problem. So we have the nut loose. So we're just gonna do some real small amount of crazy glue to get that perfect so it doesn't move around, but that can happen. They don't glue these a lot at the factory, and we'll clean that out and reattach it. Okay, so I've cleaned this nut up. It actually wasn't straight, completely straight on the bottom. There were grooves in the bone, so this was rough cut, probably from the factory. And I've smoothed it and leveled it, so it looks pretty good. And I've cleaned out the grooves a bit for the strings. This does not have any wiggle, so we can see when we slide in, we're not wiggling back and forth. It is a tight fit. I think it's a little tighter now. I can't move it at all. So we're just going to do a couple drops of super glue, and that'll be great for that. I noticed that some of these pearl inlays are very dark, so I used 600 grit to sand them a little brighter. That one came out better. That one not so much. So I'm not going to go crazy with those. They've darkened maybe with some of the cleaning or polishing we did, but I think they're going to be just fine. So I'm just going to use some quick Ernie ball polish to get this fretboard back to where it was a couple months back before we string it up. I didn't like how that fretboard was looking. Like I said, it's been many months, maybe 3 months since I worked on this guitar, so I think that fretboard dried out just a little more. I did do a very light coating of this beeswax. This is good stuff. It just conditions it nicely, and you'll see how it kind of came out. So, all right, we're gonna string it up.